Hello everyone, and a big welcome to Sanderson TV. This is going to be a platform where we dissect all of the economic volatility that's going on in the world. We'll have a look at those news headlines and break them down for you. And we'll also talk tax with one of the best in the business when it comes to tax, and that is Roy Sanderson, who's on my right. Roy, welcome. We're going to have some fun talking about some topics that perhaps some people think are dry, but I'm sure for you, they're the lifeblood of your existence.
Thanks, Dave. Yes, we live and breathe it 24/7. We love it.
And we're going to get into those news headlines in a moment, but just on a more personal note, how are you finding the restrictions at the moment and navigating those?
Well, we have all our team working from home. Offices are closed, but we are doing appointments by telephone. So we're still rolling out lots of tax returns, lots of sets of accounts, but all being done by phone, internet, using DocuSign. And we've learnt new ways to run a business. It's excellent.
Speaking of new ways to run a business, this is one initiative that we're going down. And what do you guys want to get out of this at RJ Sanderson?
Well, we found when COVID hit initially, we felt the public and our clients were striving for information. They really needed information. So this is just another information platform where we can get information out to our business clients and the general public about things like JobKeeper, Home Office, and there's a variety of topics. So it's all about an information flow to people that need it.
And you talk about, providing information. I think that there is significant amounts of information there, and one of the things that we want to do on this show is break down exactly what that information means into sort of nice, palatable mouthfuls that people can understand, that people can explain to their friends.
We're looking at simplification, easy to understand, make it just so everybody gets it.
Okay, well, let's get into it. Let's get into our news headlines here on RJ Sanderson TV. And the first term that we want to go into is a term that everyone has no doubt heard of. It's JobKeeper, Roy. And this is a government policy that was brought in as an economic stimulus package to help individuals who are out of work. But tell us a little bit more about JobKeeper and what it is and what purpose it's serving at the moment.
So JobKeeper 1.0 was invented. If the business turnover was down by 30% or more in any 1 month from the month of March, they got JobKeeper all the way through to September. Then the government brought in JobKeeper 2.0, which says that from September, you can still get JobKeeper, but you have to be turnover tested each quarter. So you only get it if your turnover is still down by 30%. Unlike the first JobKeeper, where if your turnover was down 1 month, you continued to get it until September.
And we're here in Victoria, where we're seeing stage 4 restrictions affecting businesses and affecting workers. What are we hearing regarding JobKeeper and potential extensions in that space?
So the extensions right at the moment are that it'll run through to end of March. So the JobKeeper reduces from 1,500 to 1,200 at the end of September, and then to 1,000 from January if people are continuing to get JobKeeper.
And we heard from Senator Matthias Cormann yesterday, who said in the press some interesting comments. Finance Minister Matthias Cormann reaffirmed plans for the JobKeeper wage subsidy to start scaling back from September, but left the door open for extensions to the scheme if the pandemic worsens. How important is that reassurance going to be for workers and for businesses moving forward, Roy?
I think the government needs to put a full stop on the end of this, but there's so much uncertainty about what will happen with COVID-19. So to leave the door open or ajar just a little bit, I think is a good idea. Some industries will take years to recover. Hospitality, possibly a long time. Tourism, a very long time. I don't think we'll be travelling like we used to. That would be the old world. That's going to take many years to come back.
What about retail? This is a space that you have many clients in, and there are a number of restrictions that people have to navigate, not just for COVID compliance, but also in terms of lodging their paperwork for JobKeeper. How are you finding the reaction from retailers?
Retailer is an interesting one because retailers have been closed, but they're still allowed to operate for click and collect or click and deliver. So a lot of retailing, the staff of retailers felt they're getting JobKeeper so they can stay at home and do nothing. But the retailer needs the staff to come in and build up the orders that are being done online for click and collect. Click and send is if it's out, the customer is outside 5 kilometres. So it's important that the staff realise that if I'm still getting JobKeeper, I should be working the number of hours to make up that $750, and I should be going to work, as long as there's a COVID-safe plan in place by that retailer, even though the front doors are closed.
How are you finding that from an employer perspective? I'm assuming that there are some employers that might be struggling to find workers that actually do want to come to work, because there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and there are some workers that are, we hear of teachers in particular that there's certain I suppose, opposition to coming in physically. How are you finding that in the retail space?
In the retail space, that's a big problem, because they don't want to go to work. They want to stay at home, but they need to go to work. And it's also a problem for employment agencies that take on casuals. There's factories that are still supplying to the building industry that are operating with a COVID-safe plan. And employment agencies want to get the staff in, and they're struggling with that. So there are a lot of people saying, in this 6 weeks in Melbourne Metro, I'm just staying home. But that's not what they should be doing.
You sort of get the sense, moving into that theme of the COVID-safe plan, that developing a rigid COVID-safe plan is just going to be absolutely crucial for businesses during this 6-week period, so that, as you say, when other restrictions are lifted or when restrictions are increased, they've got that COVID-safe plan that allows them to at least give their workers certainty that they can come to work and be safe.
And there are templates to have that plan put in place. It's written, it's signed off by the team that are working. It's all about social distancing. It's all about sanitisers. And there's a template that you can get from RJS, if you want one, that will help a business develop that COVID-safe plan.
So moving away from retailers and moving to another sector that had heightened restrictions at the last round of announcements, trade industries and tradies. It's a difficult space for tradies at the moment trying to navigate. A lot of them are sole traders. What advice do you give to tradies at the moment?
Well, interestingly, a lot of tradies continued to work with JobKeeper 1.0 and didn't get JobKeeper and didn't need it because they continued to work. Now they're being forced to close. And the uncertainty out there in the marketplace is it too late to get JobKeeper? And the answer is no. You can still get JobKeeper for the month of August if you believe your turnover is going to drop by more than 30%. But it's very important that you actually register with the tax office before the end of August.
We talk about the paperwork involved in JobKeeper. There's a little bit of paperwork, and I know that when JobKeeper 1.0 was first introduced, there was a lot of confusion. We saw that the Treasury estimates were well above what actually transpired because of some incorrect numbers that were lodged or whatever happened in that space. How important is it for tradies to seek advice in this space rather than just letting it all slip? Obviously we hear of mental health as well being a big problem, and the two being linked. How important is it for tradies to seek advice and make sure they get this paperwork lodged correctly?
I would not recommend a tradie attempt it themselves. They will not get it right.
And that's no offence to the tradies out there. We know that there are some very cluey tradies out there, but for everyone, isn't it? It's difficult.
I bring in a carpenter for my carpentry work at home, bring in an accountant for this sort of work, because there's a lot to do, and you've got to make sure you not only register, but then you have to identify each month. I had a call this morning from a client who said that they'd done their own work, happened to be in the cleaning industry, had done their own work, but hadn't got JobKeeper since they registered in April and wanted to know what went wrong. Well, they did stage 1, but they failed to do stage 2. They have missed out on months and months of JobKeeper because they didn't follow it up and didn't realise the process.
Can you back apply for JobKeeper?
Only 1 month.
Right.
And only with Commissioner's discretion. So we ring the tax office on behalf of the client and say this was done incorrectly or a mistake was made, and you've got to hope the person on the phone is feeling sorry for you and ticks the box and says, yes, we'll allow you to get that extra month that you were going to miss out on.
That's only because you've got the good relationship with the Commissioner there, and we're going to go into tax now because that is another area that's changing rapidly. And we want to talk about home office costs and the ATO. We're seeing record lodgements at the moment, aren't we, at the tax office? And I want to take you some words from the Assistant Commissioner, Karen Fote, I should say. She said, so far, we're looking at a record-breaking tax time in terms of lodgement numbers, but one thing we don't want to see is record-breaking number of easily avoidable errors. That's where you come in, Roy. We are, people in their haste to get their refund are putting in tax lodgements as fast as they can, but there's two things there. They might make mistakes, or they might leave money on the table that they could have had.
I think the most common thing, if people were doing it and lodging their own tax returns online using the MyGov account, it was very easy. A message came up and said your pay-as-you-go income statement, they're called now, your income statement is tax ready. Do you wish to lodge, yes or no? And if you press yes, that lodges your tax return. But you failed to ask questions about home office, donations, travel. There's so many more things that you might be able to claim. So I think we're going to have a stage in a couple of months' time when people have got their refund in a hurry and they'll be engaging with accounting firms to say, can you just have a look at this and make sure I've left no money on the table here?
So before you get into it, before you go and lodge, just let's have a chat about some of the deductions that you guys might be able to find on behalf of people, starting with home offices. We've seen everyone transition to work from home. And of course, they're doing that at a cost that they wouldn't ordinarily do. How does that work in terms of deductions?
So one of our questions is we ask our client how many hours per week they would normally work from home before COVID, pre-COVID. And that might be 8 to 10 hours. So we would use that per week, multiplied by the number of weeks, at 52 cents per hour. The government changed it and said, due to COVID, from the 1st of March, you can use 80 cents per hour. And everybody puts their hands up and says, oh, that's great, we should use 80 cents per hour. And if you did your own tax return, you might have done that. But that 80 cents includes stationery, telephone, internet, a laptop if you bought a laptop, any computer equipment you purchased for home, a desk you may have purchased from home. So you work out the numbers, what you've spent to actually work at home, including the internet, and realise that maybe the 80 cents doesn't give us a bigger refund. We drop it to 52 cents and we can claim all those other things. That's the calculation that an accountant is going to do. Right,
okay, and then and there's some interesting questions that people have started to ask around, you know, I have to sit on a Zoom call. I'll ask the question. I have to sit on a Zoom call at home, and sometimes I look presentable, sometimes I don't. Can I claim the cost of the laundry for sitting on the Zoom call at home? You know, there's interesting differences in what can be claimed and what can't be.
There's differences, but there's really only one right answer. So jackets, ties are not tax deductible. It's got to be a uniform.
There you go.
You're working from home and you're in your tracky dacks. We can't claim the tracky dacks either, I'm afraid. But what about coffee, tea?
Well, interesting. You tell me. I'm not going to guess.
Well, coffee, tea, because it's been a common question, coffee and tea, and I'm going to extend that because there's been a rush at the shops on toilet paper. The Home Office needs a toilet. Unfortunately, the ATO have stated categorically you cannot claim at home any coffee, tea, milk or toilet paper.
Well, okay, interesting. We'll leave that space. I want to move before we move on to our next topic. I want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. We've seen a massive increase in the number of retail investors in the stock market, and these are people that are trying to pick up a bargain, etc. That adds another layer of complexity to their tax return. And you know, is that something that you can help them with when lodging on their behalf?
So when you buy shares, it doesn't go on the tax return, but when the company pays a dividend, and they may be a fully franked means fully taxed dividend, that goes on your tax return. We can pick that up from the ATO portal, so that's quite easy. The complication or the work comes when you sell the shares, because when you sell them, we have to match the sale proceeds with the cost proceeds to work out the capital gain.
So for those that have tried their hand at a bit of stock investing over the COVID time while they've been sitting at home, there is a layer of complexity, and probably best to chat with you guys, I'd suggest.
Yeah, because there's two different layers to it. There's one is if you buy to hold, that's a capital gain. If you buy and sell within 12 months, that's a trading gain. So that's profit or loss is going onto your tax return.
Yeah, or loss there. That's an important piece of advice, and we're going to chat investment a little bit later on in the webinar. Let's just before we move on, actually, I want to talk about the website rjsanderson.com.au. There are fact sheets available on home office costs, and important that people visit the website to have a look.
Yes, on the website, knowledge bank, and then scroll down to fact finder, and there's lots of fact sheets about JobKeeper, about home office.
Make sure you jump on the website there, rjsanderson.com.au. Super and early withdrawals. We're seeing some staggering numbers here on this front, Roy. And have a look at this. Latest figures from the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority show 4.1 million claims, $31 billion worth of early super withdrawals. As a general question, can you go through some of the pros and cons of withdrawing super early?
Well, I'm aligned with our wealth management team that advise in this area. You should only take super out if you really need it. If it's to buy the big screen TV, that's the wrong reason. So you only get one chance at this, and if you were to take $10,000 out, the maximum, and you can take less if you need less, that could have a huge impact when you retire on your retirement money. So only take it for what it's designed for, is if you really need it.
If there is someone that really needs it and they are in sort of financial hardship, as I think the clause requires them to be, how do they go about it? What's the best thing to do?
You must set up a MyGov account. Accountants can't do it, so you do it on your MyGov account by linking it to your superannuation fund. And the deadline to do this is the 24th of September. Because right now there's people going on JobKeeper, and that's one of the conditions for you to get the 10,000. The maximum of 10,000 out. You've got to be on JobKeeper. It just can't be because you feel like you want $10,000.
Right, so there's some conditions there that have to be adhered to if you do want to withdraw that super. But as you say, it's an important decision and one that shouldn't be taken lightly. It's not like a government stimulus handout. It's something that is going to have long-term implications. Can you sort of talk to exactly why it is going to have such long-term implications?
Well, if you take $10,000, and depending on how far away you are from retirement, but we do know property, shares generally, despite what we're looking at right now, will double every 10 to 12 years. So in 10 years' time, 10 to 12 years, that 10,000 should be worth 20. But and then that 10 years after that 20 is worth 40. So if you're 30 years from retirement, you think, I'll take the 10 grand out so I can, as soon as this is over, go on a holiday or buy a new car or buy a big TV, you potentially could cost yourself, close to $100,000 in what it's going to be worth when you finally retire. So it is an important decision, and you should get help and talk to somebody about whether you really need it or if there's other options.
That's a lot of TVs at $100,000. So maybe think twice before withdrawing your super early. Now, Roy, we've spoken a lot about individuals and we've spoken about what individuals can do to navigate these turbulent times. What about businesses? I want to talk mainly about the state government grants that we've had changes to recently, particularly in Victoria. We're seeing restrictions lifted in Victoria, or restrictions increased, I should say, in Victoria. And there is a grant that is available to help businesses at the moment.
So that grant was $5,000. It got increased to $10,000, which is available to Metro and Country Victoria. But there are certain conditions. Not only do you have to be on JobKeeper, but you also have to employ staff, which was not one of the conditions on the first state government grant, but it's on this one. So you've got to have a work cover number, and if you do employ staff and don't have a work cover number, you need to go out and get one, because you're supposed to have work cover if you employ staff. But even if you backdate it, you won't get the grant because you didn't have work cover at the 30th of June. So work cover, government grant, pay GST, turnover more than $75,000. So they are some of the 4 conditions, and you'll find a fact sheet on our website for that as well.
And then, of course, JobKeeper is inherently is paid to businesses as well. So I sort of mentioned that we're talking about it in the context of individuals, but also in the context of businesses. It's an important lever that businesses need to explore, whether they're small, medium, larger businesses, that they need to explore to ensure that they can, that they're maximising their ability to continue.
Yes, and the point of JobKeeper was to keep the connection between the employer and the employee, and I think it's done that very well. But yes, there are many businesses that would have gone under without JobKeeper. So taking politics out of it, JobKeeper has been very necessary for a lot of businesses.
Okay, I want to talk about a word that frightens a lot of people: recession and the economy. We hear about this term recession a lot, and the fact that we are in the midst of a recession at the moment. Tell us, Roy, what exactly a recession is. Okay,
so there's a thing called the GDP, Gross Domestic Product, which measures our spending in the economy. It's done by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and they measure if our spending is increasing or decreasing. And if we have a decline, and we did in March, where it went down by 0.3%, if we have 2 decline quarters in a row, that's the definition of a recession. We know that March was down by 0.3%. it is expected and it's clear that June will be down by something. It won't be up, not the way the economy is at the moment. So we are generally in a recession now, and that June figure gets announced near the end of September.
You mentioned GDP. I want to show you a graph from the Reserve Bank that we've got that really just does illustrate here. You can see there that we've got pretty constant growth of GDP from sort of 2013, 2014 onwards, and then there you see February 2020 GDP just falls off a cliff there, and I suppose that's exactly what you're talking about there. There's the first quarter of negative growth in GDP there. So what does that actually mean for businesses, this idea of a recession, and how does businesses navigate their way through that?
It's a great graph, and it shows a V curve, which is a sharp incline after a sharp decline. The question and that's a forecast, but the reality is, will the public come out and spend money straight after this COVID? We want them to, because we want that to jump right back up. I have a fear factor that many people who are getting JobKeeper and have gone through a very tough time will keep that money in the bank, pay off credit card, reduce debt, and won't go out and spend. But that's not good for the economy. We need money turning around, the wheels turning, and people spending, which allows other people to spend. And that will give us the V curve that we want.
Your suspicion, I think, is backed up by the Reserve Bank, and we've got an interesting quote from the Assistant Governor there, Dr. Alice, that says the recovery is expected to be slow and uneven, and GDP will probably take several years to return to the trend path expected prior to the virus outbreak. That's a pretty grim picture. As you say, is the key to that people simply going out and spending in the local economy?
I think so. It's about them feeling comfortable, confident, and being prepared to go out and go to the coffee shop, go to the restaurant, start travelling a little bit. I think Australian tourism may do okay, because I think Australians will reduce their overseas travel and will start travelling within Australia a lot more. So I'm hoping that happens, because we need people to spend money.
And just to that point, what are some of the ways that governments can create policy, or businesses can innovate to create spending? What are some of the known techniques that we see there? Well,
what the policy, I think, from where I sit, has been about supporting people, putting food on the table. I think the next lot of policy has to be about creating jobs. And I know there are no jobs if we're not spending money, but the next lot of policy shifts have got to be job creation. I think that's what we need, and incentives to create and employ people, because we can't have the number of people on JobKeeper and JobSeeker continue indefinitely. It's got to change.
And you mentioned just before one word that I want to touch on quickly before we move on to our first guest, and that word is confidence. I think that this is a really important word. We see the Consumer Confidence Index, we see Business Confidence Index, and we saw both of them in February, March just completely fall off a cliff. How important, as you say, is confidence to that sort of snowballing effect in the economy?
Oh, I think it's crucial. I think it's probably up there as number one factor. And pre-COVID, it's measured about how politics is going, and bushfires and retailers suffering before that because of online purchases. So confidence, wanes a little bit, but I think confidence right now is going to be determined by COVID-19. Are the numbers coming down? And are we all wearing masks? And I think the confidence will be health-related, where previously it hasn't really been health-related.
So that then begs a question. Do you think the vaccine is the trigger for things to go back to normal, or do you think that there'll still be a new normal that everyone will need to adhere to?
I'm hoping there'll be a vaccine and things go back to normal, and I think we all do hope that. But I think there's going to be a new world and a new way to do business. Working from home, maybe 1 day, 3-4 days a week, that will become more common. There are different ways we're going to be doing business going forward.
Interesting. And we'll continue to do that on RJ Sanderson. We'll break down those the news headlines for today. We'll continue to break them down, and you are watching RJ Sanderson TV. Well, it's time to move on to the investment space, and Tony Sarai is the man on the ground there, and Tony joins us on Zoom now. Tony, welcome. Thanks for joining us on RJ Sanderson TV.
Thanks for having me.
Tony, market volatility at the moment, it seems like it's at an all-time high. What are your thoughts on the investment options that are out there at the moment? Are there opportunities for investors?
Absolutely, there's opportunities for investors. Market volatility is the best time for opportunities, and this is a fantastic time to be able to look at everything that's out there. And volatility is a funny word. People hear volatility and they I'll say get nervous about it. However, without volatility, there's no opportunity. So it's a fantastic time to be able to get in and look towards the future.
Tony, I'm trying to break this down for the average man in the street and not for financial professionals like yourself. Can you tell or define for us what is a bull market and what's a bear market? What does it mean in common language?
Yeah, look, technically what it means is a bull market is there's no, I'll say, science or numbers behind it, but what has been described is a bull market is where there's been a increase of about 20%, and a bear market is where there has been a decrease of 20%. So as an example, recently where we hit bear territory when the market dropped by 35% from, let's say, February to March, that was classified as hitting bear market territory because there was that 20% drop, 35% drop. And the recovery of sorts that we've had, well, we've increased from that bottom, we've increased by that 20%. So is it bull market territory? Well, it has recovery, but we're not back to where we started. So from a layman's point of view, it is actually looking at it saying, well, okay, a 20% drop is a bear market and a 20% increase is normally classified as a bull market.
Terrific, Tony. One of the common questions I'm getting when we're doing tax returns at the moment is now a good time to invest in the share market? And how do you respond to that if you were asked that question by one of our clients?
Well, very simply, now's a much better time than what it was 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 2 years ago. And I'll also ask this question, for what reason are you looking to invest? Because there's got to be to a point, there's got to be, we talk about goals. So what is it that you're looking to achieve by investing? Are you looking for growth? Are you looking for income? Or are you looking at a combination of the two? They're the only two reasons why you would look to invest. And as a result, there are opportunities in the market at this point in time, and there have been all the way along. So as an example, there are assets out there that have not decreased with the downturn that we've had, and at the same time there are some that have actually done not so well, but have recovered extremely well. And if you're able to buy in at that lower point, well, you'd be sitting quite comfortably at this point in time as well.
Tony, one of the points that I wanted to raise with you, we've seen this massive spike in the number of retail investors, but that brings with it a number of risks. What we've also seen, though, conversely, is some wealth managers that have come out and said now's not a good time to invest, and we've seen the bull market recovery. So there's perhaps some tension between the two parties. What do you say to people who are sort of what that you mentioned, that want to invest but are sort of trying to make a decision as to whether to use a wealth manager or go alone?
Look, I would say, number one, what are you looking to invest for, and what's your time frame? And from a wealth point of view, it's not as easy as just saying, well, okay, I'm going to pick this stock that I've heard from a friend of mine, and I'm going to invest in this. It is more about finding good quality assets for the longer term. And for me, it is about how do we construct something that is appropriate for our clients. What's appropriate for you, Dave, may not be appropriate for Roy. And so therefore that is really important. So that's where, from a wealth point of view, it's important to, and this is where Katrina comes in and where she provides advice for clients, is that what is appropriate for you compared to what is appropriate for Roy.
And what are the determining factors usually in that? Is that going to be around life circumstances or risk appetite? What are some of the factors that determine
Absolutely. That? So it'll be looking at risk appetite. It will be looking at lifestyle. It'll be looking at goals. What are you looking to achieve? What is your time frame for those goals as well? So as an example, a client that I've just had not too long ago wanted to buy a boat at a cost of $100,000, and that time frame. Well, what is that time frame for us to achieve that goal? compared to somebody that's now looking at retirement and wanting to live on, $80,000 or $90,000 a year. And it's about finding that what is appropriate for you, and then what are the underlying investments that we need to be able to achieve that goal as well.
Tony, some great tips and great advice. So what's the best way for people to get in contact if they want to find out more from you?
Get a hold of your RJS accountant or get a hold of your RJS wealth planner and have a chat to them, and they have got my direct line and number. So they're able to get a hold of me. And
rjsanderson.com.au as well if you want to jump on the website. Tony Sarai, thanks so much for joining us on RJ Sanderson TV.
Thank you, Dave.
Tony Sarai there from RJS Wealth Management with some very valuable insights there. It's turbulent times, and navigating these turbulent times is very important. You want to mitigate the losses, minimise the losses, and also try and get through perhaps a little bit ahead of the field. But speaking of getting ahead of the field, here's a Did You Know from Roy. We love a Did You Know, and this is going to be an interesting one. What have you got for us today, Roy?
Well, Dave, I thought I'd throw out there that if you are a business and you're paying your superannuation late, or you're a staff member and your boss is paying your superannuation late, the Australian Taxation Office have an amnesty right at the moment where you can come clean and say, put your hand up, I'm paying super late, and they will waive any penalties or fines. And you have until the 7th of September to lodge that amnesty documentation. How's that?
Interesting. So just under a month there. I think the reason that most people don't know that is because they don't want to necessarily put it out there that there's a lot of people that are behind, but an amnesty there for people to go and lodge during this period, and all will be forgiven. All
will be forgiven, and they can go on a payment plan as well. So certainly a good idea that businesses, if they're behind, put their hand up.
Well, we've got another interesting guest here that we want to welcome to the conversation. That's Katrina Brooke from RJS Wealth Management, who I'm told aptly described as KP. KP, welcome to RJ Sanderson TV. How are you navigating these new restrictions in your role?
Well, thank you. It's lovely to be here today. I think the restrictions are the same for everyone. In stage 4 lockdown, we're all working from home. Thank goodness for Zoom, FaceTime, we're able to connect with our clients. We spend a lot of time at the moment helping our clients with questions. It's all a little bit stressing, and the last thing that they need to worry about is their finances. So we do everything we can. And as Roy does, we get questions left to field all the time, and we're here to help people.
KP, I thought I'd ask you the first question. Our accounting and tax team are doing lots of tax returns at the moment, and every now and then, more often than not, somebody gets a tax refund that's quite healthy, because there are some benefits at the moment, and lower incomes can mean higher tax refunds. So if somebody's getting a higher than normal tax refund, what would you recommend that they should be doing or considering?
That's a great question, Roy, and more so because right now we're in a situation where a lot of people are running down their cash reserves. A question that everyone can have a think about while we're talking today is, over the last 5 years with the tax returns that you have received, how much of it's gone back into investing and how much have you spent on lifestyle? That would be an interesting calculation for you to make. But the learning curve for us at the moment is a lot of people don't have the necessary cash flow buffers that they should have to get through these arduous times. So I'm a very big believer that if you've got a great tax return because you've done some sort of investing, you might have an investment property, you might have bought some shares and have some franking credits, that is part of your personal business plan for your money. And that particular amount of money should go back towards your investments. Or if you don't have a cash buffer, start to build one up, learn from this experience. I always bring up the story about people who bought Telstra 2 shares. I don't know if we can all remember that, but they were around $7.40. And of course, they've never hit that peak ever. A lot of people who bought them were putting their dividends into their own bank account and basically going down and spending it at Coles or Woolies. So they never really felt the effect of the growth of the stock. If you reinvested those dividends back into the stocks, if it takes that to make you grow your investments, well, you would have had a substantial amount of money. And Roy, one of One of our clients in the business, his parents made him buy some shares, CBA shares, when they first floated. And if you can remember, they were $10. And he just reinvested the dividends. He was just a kid. And today, you know, given the fact even the market's down a little bit, that 10,000's grown into $250,000 because he's taken that step to look after himself. So tax savings are very important, but what you do on the end of that is very, very important. We have lots of different mechanisms that we can use, reinvestments, borrowing money to basically save tax, but also helps you grow your portfolio. Be very smart and always, I'm not saying don't spoil yourself. Everybody needs to spoil yourself a little bit. Don't use the whole lot though. Be very, very careful that you keep some of it and put it aside. So we earn millions over our lifetime, literally millions. And we need to be aware that even though we're the lucky country here in Australia and we have a great lifestyle, just be prepared for these arduous times like now and later on when you're retired and not earning so much.
KP, what advice are you giving to small businesses at the moment? Considering, you know, Roy and I spoke about grants being available for small businesses, and also there are many small businesses that are doing it super tough at the moment. What's some of this planning advice that you're giving to small businesses?
Yeah, small businesses have a lot more expenses than the average person who's just a PAYG person. Some of the things that they can do is talk to us about doing some things like delaying payments, making sure perhaps they're still insured, having a look at their cash flows, making sure that they plan for the future, having a look at helping them with things like delaying payments, etc., if it takes that. But I think the key thing, and where I come into it, is to make sure that people don't get themselves into a situation where they're strung out with money. It's always a great idea to have a plan in place to make sure you protect yourself, the risk of protecting yourself while we're in these sorts of situations, plus also plan for the future.
KP, it's been a big push at RJS to encourage our clients to do some planning. Any comments around that would help people?
Oh, look, Roy, I take my hat off to those people who think and literally do investments and try and do something for themselves to help. So doing something rather than nothing is okay, but make sure that that something that you're doing is the right thing. So a lot of people make decisions and it's like a bad patchwork quilt. It's always a really great idea to have it all pulled in together. So the doing it yourself, I call it amateur advice. It's one-off advice for yourself. There's nothing better than ongoing advice because there's a changing landscape all the time with investments, with legislation, and that's part of what I do. I work with people ongoingly to make sure that they take every opportunity they can. And I work with clients, with you as well, Roy, because you're the tax guru, and it's making sure we cover every stone for all these people.
KP, some great insights there for individuals and also for small businesses and for clients alike. So thanks so much for joining us on RJ Sanderson TV.
Thank you.
That was Katrina Poolbrook there, and some great information there, Roy. We've just about finished our show for tonight on RJ Sanderson TV. What are some closing thoughts from you as we head deeper and deeper into uncertainty?
Yeah, probably one that didn't come up tonight, but setting goals. Research shows that if you write your goals down, you are much more likely to achieve them. So I think while people are at home, COVID-19, possibly lockdown, maybe with children and homeschooling, sit down and write down what your goals are. And then make sure that they're aligned with your partner if you've got a partner, and maybe how that's going to affect the family so that you're working towards the same things. And I'm not just talking financial, I'm actually talking other things. It might be a new car, a holiday, but work out a new house. Work out what those goals are, align them. So when we come out of this, the other end, you've got a direction and you're going to put the stepping stones in place to achieve those goals that are aligned within your family unit.
Well, some interesting advice there, and appreciate all your time. Roy, we've had good fun today. It's been good fun. We might come back again and do it again.
Let's do it again, Dave. I loved it.
Fantastic. Roy Sanderson there, and you've been watching RJ Sanderson TV. Thanks so much for joining us, and all the best.